In a quiet mountain village in ancient Japan, a young man named Matajuro once approached a legendary swordmaster named Banzo. With burning determination in his eyes, he asked a question that many of us in one way or another have asked in our own lives. How long will it take me to become a master? Banzo looked at him calmly and replied, 10 years. Dissatisfied, Matajuro pressed further. What if I train twice as hard as everyone else? The master paused, then said 20 years. Confused and frustrated, Matajuro insisted, then I will devote every waking moment to training. I will work harder than anyone. Banzo responded, then it will take 30 years. This paradox reveals something deeply uncomfortable about the human condition. We are obsessed with speed. We want results now. Whether it's success, love, healing, or enlightenment, we approach growth as if it were a race to be won rather than a process to be lived. Matajuro's mistake was not his lack of dedication, but his urgency. His desire to arrive quickly was in fact the very obstacle preventing his arrival. Impatience creates tension in the mind. Instead of being fully present with the practice, we become fixated on outcomes. Every moment becomes a means to an end rather than an end in itself. In this state, learning becomes shallow. We may accumulate techniques, memorize steps, and simulate progress, but something essential is missing: the depth that only arises through time, repetition, and presence. Banzo understood that mastery is not simply about effort. It is about the quality of awareness we bring to that effort. When the mind is rushing toward the future, it cannot fully inhabit the present. And without presence, there is no true learning, only imitation. Matajuro needed to slow down, not speed up. He needed to release his attachment to results and allow the process to shape him naturally. In our modern world, this lesson is more relevant than ever. We are surrounded by messages that glorify rapid success and instant transformation. We are told that with the right method, the right mindset, or the right shortcut, we can achieve anything quickly. But the deeper truths of life, wisdom, patience, inner peace, do not obey this logic. They unfold gradually, often invisibly, through consistent and mindful engagement with the present moment. Growth is not something we force, it is something we allow. Just as a tree does not grow faster because we pull on its branches, we cannot accelerate our own development through sheer urgency. In fact, the more we push, the more we disturb the natural rhythm of learning. Matajuro's journey teaches us that time is not the enemy of mastery, it is its foundation. What appears to be delay is often preparation. What feels like slowness is actually depth forming beneath the surface. When we let go of the need to arrive quickly, we begin to truly arrive in each moment. And it is only there, in that quiet, patient presence, that real mastery begins to emerge. For a long time, Matajuro believed that mastery of the sword would come from learning techniques, precise movements, perfect timing, and disciplined repetition. But under Banzo's guidance, something unexpected happened. Instead of immediately teaching him how to fight, the master assigned him simple, almost mundane tasks: cooking, cleaning, and tending the garden. Days turned into months, and months into years, with no formal instruction in swordsmanship. To an outside observer, it might have seemed like a waste of time, but in truth, something far more important was being cultivated. Through these ordinary activities, Matajuro was unknowingly developing a quality that no technique alone could ever provide: presence. Each movement, whether chopping vegetables or sweeping the floor, became an opportunity to be fully aware. There was no audience, no performance, no goal to impress anyone, only the direct experience of action unfolding in the present moment. This is what Zen calls the don't know mind, a state of open, alert awareness that is not clouded by expectation, judgment, or the need to control outcomes. In this state, learning happens differently. It is no longer about accumulating knowledge, but about becoming sensitive to reality as it is. Matajuro wasn't thinking about how to become a great swordsman. He was learning how to be completely present with whatever he was doing. And in that presence, his mind became quieter, his perception sharper, and his reactions more natural. Eventually, Banzo began to attack him unexpectedly while he was cooking, walking, or resting. At first, Matajuro was constantly caught off guard, but over time something shifted. Without consciously trying, he began to sense the master's movements. His body responded before thought could arise. This was not the result of memorized techniques, but of embodied awareness. He had learned not just with his mind, but with his whole being. This is the fundamental difference between knowledge and embodied wisdom. Knowledge is something we can explain, analyze, and store in memory. It is useful, but limited. Embodied wisdom, on the other hand, cannot be separated from direct experience. It lives in the body, in perception, in intuition. You don't think your way into it. You grow into it through presence. In modern life, we often mistake information for understanding. We read books, watch tutorials, and gather endless advice, believing that more knowledge will lead to mastery. But without presence, all of this remains superficial. True learning requires us to slow down and fully engage with what we are doing moment by moment. The don't know mind is not about ignorance, but about openness. It is the willingness to meet each moment fresh without the burden of preconceptions. In this openness, we become more responsive, more alive, and more attuned to the subtle realities around us. Matajuro did not become a master by thinking about the sword. He became a master by learning how to be present. And once that foundation was established, technique arose naturally as an expression of awareness rather than a substitute for it. In a small village where cherry blossoms marked the passing of seasons, there lived a young couple deeply devoted to one another. Their love was simple, sincere, and full of quiet joy. But as life inevitably reminds us, even the most beautiful moments are touched by impermanence. The young wife fell gravely ill, and as her strength faded, her attachment grew stronger. On her deathbed, gripped by fear of loss, she made her husband promise that he would never love another. "If you do," she warned, "I will return as a ghost and haunt you." Bound by grief and love, the husband agreed. After her passing, he honored his promise. For months, he lived in mourning, clinging to her memory. But slowly, life began to return. He noticed the warmth of sunlight again, the kindness of others, and eventually he found himself opening his heart to someone new. Yet the night he allowed himself this possibility, something terrifying occurred. His deceased wife appeared before him, angry, accusing, and filled with jealousy. Night after night she returned, describing in precise detail his conversations, his gifts, even his most private thoughts. "I know everything you do," she whispered. The man was consumed by fear, guilt, and confusion. How could a ghost know so much? Desperate, he sought help from a Zen master. After listening calmly, the master offered an unusual solution. "The next time she appears," he said, "ask her how many beans you hold in your hand. If she truly knows everything, she will answer." That night, when the ghost returned, the man followed the instruction. But when faced with a question that lay outside his own knowledge, the ghost vanished instantly and never came back. This story reveals a profound truth: the ghost was never real. It was a creation of the man's own mind, fueled by guilt and emotional attachment. Every detail the ghost seemed to know was already present in his own consciousness. His fear gave it form, and his belief gave it power. This is not just an ancient tale, it is a mirror of how the human mind operates, even today. We constantly create psychological ghosts that haunt us. These may take the form of regret over past mistakes, anxiety about the future, or internal voices that criticize and judge us. Like the ghost, they appear convincing, even omniscient. They seem to know exactly where to hurt us, what to remind us of, and how to keep us trapped. Modern psychology offers similar insights. What we often experience as external pressure or unavoidable suffering is frequently rooted in internal narratives. Cognitive distortions such as catastrophizing, overgeneralizing, or self-blame can create realities that feel just as real as any physical threat. The mind, when left unchecked, becomes both the storyteller and the source of fear. The man's liberation came not from fighting the ghost, but from seeing through it. By asking a simple question, something beyond his own mental projection, he broke the illusion. This reflects a deeper principle. Awareness dissolves what unconscious belief sustains. When we begin to question our thoughts, rather than blindly accept them, their grip weakens. The danger lies not in the thoughts themselves, but in our identification with them. When we believe every voice in our mind is true, we become prisoners of our own inner world. But when we recognize that these ghosts are constructions, patterns, shaped by memory, emotion, and conditioning, we begin to reclaim our freedom. The story of the ghost wife teaches us that fear is often self-created, and suffering is sustained by unexamined thought. The mind has the power to create illusions so vivid that they feel undeniable, but it also holds the key to liberation. By bringing awareness to our inner world, by questioning what seems absolute, we can see that many of the things that haunt us were never truly there. If we look closely at the story of the ghost, a deeper truth begins to emerge, one that goes beyond illusion and touches the very root of human suffering. The man was not truly being haunted by his deceased wife. He was being haunted by his own mind. What appeared to be an external force was in reality an internal storm made of guilt, fear, and unresolved attachment. Guilt is one of the most powerful sources of inner suffering. It binds us to the past, replaying moments. We cannot change, whispering that we have done something wrong, that we do not deserve peace. In the man's case, his decision to move on and love again clashed with the promise he made in a moment of grief. That inner conflict gave rise to a sense of betrayal, not from reality, but from his own beliefs. The ghost was simply the voice of that guilt given form and presence. Fear operates in a similar way. It projects imagined consequences into the future and convinces us they are real. The man feared punishment, feared breaking his promise, feared the unknown. And so his mind created a reality where those fears could manifest. The more he believed in it, the more real it became. Regret, too, plays its role, keeping us anchored to what should have been, preventing us from fully living what is. The Buddha once said, "Nothing can harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded." This insight cuts directly to the heart of the matter. It is not the external world that primarily causes our suffering, but the way we interpret and react to it. Two people can experience the same event, yet suffer in completely different ways. Why? Because suffering is not built into the event itself, it is constructed within the mind. This distinction between external and internal suffering is crucial. External pain is often unavoidable. Loss, illness, disappointment, these are natural parts of life. But internal suffering is the layer we add on top of these experiences. It is the resistance, the stories, the judgments, and the emotional loops that amplify pain and turn it into prolonged distress. In the story, the wife's death was the external reality. The grief that followed was natural. But the haunting, the fear, the torment, these were internal creations. They were sustained not by anything outside the man, but by his own unexamined thoughts and emotional attachments. This pattern is universal. We may not see literal ghosts, but we carry invisible burdens. A harsh word someone once said to us can echo in our minds for years. A mistake we made can define how we see ourselves long after the moment has passed. We become both the creator and the victim of our own inner narratives. Understanding this does not mean dismissing our pain. It means recognizing its source. When we see clearly that much of our suffering arises from within, we also begin to see that freedom is possible. Not by changing the world, but by changing our relationship to our thoughts. The moment we become aware of this inner process, something shifts. We no longer blindly believe every thought or emotion that arises. We begin to observe instead of react. And in that space of awareness, the grip of guilt, fear, and regret starts to loosen. Suffering may begin with life, but it is sustained by the mind. And just as the mind creates it, the mind through awareness can also bring it to an end. When the man tormented by the ghost of his deceased wife finally sought help, the Zen master did not try to argue with him or convince him that the ghost was unreal. Instead, he offered something far more powerful, a simple test. "Ask her how many beans you hold in your hand," he said. At first glance, this instruction seemed almost trivial, but hidden within it was a profound method for dissolving illusion. That night, when the ghost appeared once again full of accusations and seemingly supernatural knowledge, the man did exactly as he was told. He praised her awareness, acknowledged that she knew everything about his life, and then presented the question. "If you truly know all, tell me how many beans I hold in my hand." In that moment, something unexpected happened. The ghost fell silent and then disappeared forever. This moment reveals a fundamental truth. Illusions cannot survive direct conscious questioning. The ghost had seemed all-knowing because it was built from the man's own thoughts, his memories, his guilt, his fears. But when faced with something beyond his own knowledge, the illusion collapsed. It had no independent existence. It depended entirely on what he already believed. This is the power of awareness. Not force, not resistance, but clear seeing. Instead of fighting the illusion or running from it, the man turned toward it with a question, and that question exposed its limits. In our own lives, we often accept our thoughts as absolute truth. When a voice in the mind says, "You're not good enough," or "You will fail," we rarely stop to examine it. We react emotionally, as if the statement were a fact rather than a mental event. But what if we applied the same principle as the beans test? What if instead of believing every thought we asked, "Is this actually true? What evidence exists outside my own thinking? Can this thought stand on its own, or is it built from my fears and past experiences?" This is where critical thinking becomes an inner practice. It is not just about analyzing the external world, but about investigating the nature of our own dhan. The mind can be incredibly convincing. It can create narratives that feel real, urgent, and undeniable. But when we pause and question them, we often discover gaps, assumptions, and distortions. The Zen master's method was not about giving the man a new belief. It was about helping him see for himself. True insight cannot be imposed from the outside. It must arise from direct recognition. The question about the beans was simply a tool to break the automatic cycle of belief. This approach is deeply relevant today. In a world filled with information, opinions, and constant mental noise, the ability to question our own thoughts is more important than ever. Without it, we become trapped in patterns of anxiety, self-doubt, and emotional reactivity. But when we cultivate this inner inquiry, something changes. We create space between ourselves and our thoughts. We begin to see that not everything that appears in the mind deserves to be believed. And in that space, clarity emerges. The illusion disappears not because we destroy it, but because we no longer support it with unquestioned belief. Just like the ghost, many of our fears vanish the moment we truly look at them. On an ancient pilgrimage route that wound through mountains and across dangerous rivers, 10 devoted monks traveled together toward a distant, holy destination. Their journey was filled with hardship but also with purpose. Each step they took was driven by the belief that somewhere ahead, at the end of the road, there would be something sacred waiting for them, something that would complete them. At one point, they reached a raging river. The current was strong, the rocks beneath the surface sharp and unforgiving. Crossing it required full cooperation. One by one, they formed a human chain and carefully made their way to the other side. When they finally reached safety, soaked and exhausted, relief quickly turned into concern. Their leader decided to count everyone to make sure no one had been lost. He pointed to each monk and counted 1, 2, 3, 9. He counted again, still 9. Panic spread through the group. Each monk, one after another, counted the others, and each time the result was the same, only 9. They were convinced that one of their companions had been swept away by the river. Grief overwhelmed them. They cried, mourned, and called out for the missing monk, unable to accept what had happened. Then a passerby approached, and seeing 10 monks clearly before him, asked what was wrong. After hearing their story, he gently said, "You have forgotten to count yourself." In that instant, everything changed. There had never been a missing pilgrim. The 10th person had been present all along, but each monk, while counting, had excluded himself. Their suffering was real, their grief intense, but it was built on a simple misunderstanding. They were searching for something that was never lost. This story reflects a fundamental pattern of the human condition. We are constantly searching. We search for happiness, for meaning, for peace, for fulfillment. We believe that these things exist somewhere outside of us, in achievements, relationships, possessions, or future moments. Like the pilgrims, we move through life, convinced that something is missing, that we are incomplete. But what if the problem is not that something is missing, but that we are looking in the wrong place? In modern life, this pattern is everywhere. We chase success, believing it will finally make us feel enough. We seek validation from others, hoping it will confirm our worth. We pursue experiences, thinking they will fill an inner void. Yet even when we achieve these things, the sense of lack often returns. The destination changes, but the feeling remains. Why? Because we are counting everything except the one thing that matters most, the awareness that is experiencing it all. Just like the monks forgot to count themselves, we forget to recognize the presence within us that is already whole. We overlook the simple fact that the capacity for peace, for joy, for completeness does not come from outside, it arises from within. It is not something we acquire, but something we uncover. The tragedy is not that we search, but that we search blindly. We assume that fulfillment is elsewhere, always just out of reach. And so we keep moving, keep striving, keep looking, never realizing that what we are searching for has been quietly present the entire time. The moment of realization in the story is not about gaining something new. It is about seeing clearly what was already there. This is the essence of awakening, not achievement, but recognition. When we finally count ourselves, when we include our own awareness in the equation, something shifts. The endless search begins to dissolve. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because we are no longer operating from a sense of lack. The 10 pilgrims did not need to find their missing companion. They only needed to see him. And perhaps in the same way, we do not need to become whole. We only need to realize that we already are. The story of the 10 pilgrims reveals not only our tendency to search outside, but something even more subtle, the habit of forgetting ourselves. Each monk carefully counted the others, paying close attention, making sure no one was missing. Yet the one person each of them failed to include was the one doing the counting. This simple mistake reflects a deep psychological pattern. We are aware of everything in our experience, except the awareness itself. In daily life, this not counting yourself happens constantly. We observe our thoughts, our emotions, our relationships, our achievements, and our problems. We evaluate, compare, and analyze every aspect of our lives. But rarely do we pause to notice the one constant presence behind all of it, the awareness that is observing. This is the missing piece. We assume that we are incomplete because we are focused only on what we can see, measure, or improve. We look at our flaws, our limitations, and our unmet desires, and we conclude that something is lacking. But this conclusion is based on a partial view. It is like counting 9 pilgrims and declaring one lost, simply because we forgot to include ourselves. Awareness itself is not something we usually think about, because it is not an object. You cannot see it the way you see a thought. You cannot grasp it like you grasp an idea, and yet without it, nothing else could be experienced. It is the silent background of every moment, the space in which thoughts arise, emotions move, and life unfolds. The confusion begins when we mistake the ego for the self. The ego is made up of stories, who we think we are, what we have done, what others think of us. It is constantly changing, shaped by memory, comparison, and desire. Because the ego is unstable, it always feels incomplete. It is always trying to become something more, something better, something secure. But the deeper self, the awareness behind all of this, is not lacking anything. It does not need validation or improvement. It simply is. When we forget this, we become identified with the ego, and from that identification arises the endless feeling of not enough. This is why we keep searching, striving, and comparing. The ego is always counting what it does not have. It is always looking at the other 9 and wondering what is missing. But awareness, when recognized, reveals that nothing essential has ever been absent. The habit of forgetting ourselves is not a failure of intelligence, but a habit of attention. We have been conditioned to look outward, to focus on objects, outcomes, and identities. Very rarely are we taught to turn attention inward, not to analyze ourselves, but to notice the simple fact of being aware. When this shift happens, even briefly, something changes. The sense of lack begins to soften. We no longer feel like we are missing a part of ourselves, because we are no longer overlooking the most fundamental part. Just as the pilgrims' grief disappeared the moment they realized their mistake, much of our inner tension dissolves when we count ourselves. When we include awareness in our understanding of who we are not just the thoughts we think or the roles we play. We are the awareness in which all of that appears, and nothing is missing from that. In the bustling capital of ancient Japan, there once lived a samurai named Zengai, a man whose life would become a profound testament to transformation. Born into a code of honor and discipline, he was expected to live with integrity and loyalty, but like many, he was not immune to human weakness. He fell into a forbidden relationship with his master's wife, and when their affair was discovered, fear and desperation led him to commit a terrible act. He killed his own master and fled. In a single moment, his life collapsed. Honor was lost, identity shattered, and guilt became his constant companion. For a time, he wandered aimlessly, surviving as an outcast, but eventually, something within him began to change. The weight of what he had done did not disappear, it deepened. Yet instead of turning that weight into self-destruction, Zengai allowed it to transform into something else. One day he came upon a dangerous mountain pass where many travelers had lost their lives. The path was narrow, unstable, and unforgiving. Seeing the suffering it caused, Zengai made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He would carve a tunnel through the mountain, creating a safe passage for others. With nothing but simple tools, he began. Day after day, year after year, he chipped away at solid rock. He begged for food during the day and worked through the night. His hands became scarred, his body worn, but his resolve never wavered. This was not an act of penance performed for recognition or redemption. It was something deeper, a quiet, unwavering commitment to serve. 30 years passed. During that time, Zengai did not try to escape his past, nor did he justify it. He did not cling to guilt as a form of punishment. Instead, he transformed it into action. His remorse became fuel not for self-hatred, but for contribution. Then one day, the son of the man he had killed finally found him. Now a grown swordsman, he had spent years seeking revenge. Standing before Zengai, sword in hand, he declared his intention to take his life. Zengai did not resist. He simply said, "I will give you my life, but please allow me to finish this tunnel first." The young man agreed, expecting it to take only a short time. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, he began to observe something unexpected. He saw not a villain, but a man completely devoted to a purpose beyond himself. He saw patience, humility, and tireless effort, qualities that could not be faked. Eventually, he began to help. Working side by side with the man he once hated, his anger slowly dissolved. In its place grew something else: understanding, respect, and even gratitude. By the time the tunnel was completed, the transformation was complete, not only in Zengai, but in the one who came to kill him. When the work was done, Zengai turned to the young man and said, "Now you may take my life." But the swordsman lowered his weapon. "How can I kill my own teacher?" he asked. This story reveals a powerful truth. Transformation is not achieved through regret alone, but through action. Guilt by itself can imprison us. It keeps us looking backward, replaying what cannot be changed. But when that same energy is redirected into meaningful action, it becomes something else. Entirely, it becomes a force for healing. Zengai could not undo what he had done. The past remained unchanged, but his response to it created a future filled with benefit for others. The tunnel he carved saved countless lives. His actions did not erase his mistake, but they gave it a new context, a movement from destruction toward creation. In our own lives, we often carry the weight of things we regret. Words spoken in anger, decisions made in confusion, moments we wish we could take back. It is easy to become trapped in that weight, to define ourselves by it. But Zengai's story shows another possibility. We can transform, not by denying the past and not by punishing ourselves endlessly, but by choosing how we live now. Every action becomes an opportunity to shift direction, to move from self-centeredness to service, from guilt to contribution. True transformation is not a feeling, it is something we do. Zengai's story does not end with the completion of the tunnel. It points to a deeper understanding of what true repentance really means. In many ways, we are taught to associate repentance with guilt, feeling bad about what we have done, carrying remorse, and perhaps asking for forgiveness. While these responses are natural, they are only the beginning. Left alone, guilt can become a trap. It turns inward, creating shame, self-judgment, and a fixation on the past that prevents any real movement forward. Guilt says, "I did something wrong," but transformation asks, "What can I become because of it?" This distinction is essential. Guilt, when held onto too tightly, becomes self-centered. It keeps our attention locked on our own pain, our own mistakes, our own identity as someone who has failed. It may feel like responsibility, but often it is just another form of attachment, an attachment to a past that cannot be changed. True repentance, as illustrated by Zengai, moves in a different direction. It does not deny wrongdoing, nor does it excuse it. Instead, it fully acknowledges the harm and then chooses to respond through action. Not symbolic action, not temporary gestures, but sustained, meaningful contribution. Zengai did not spend his life apologizing. He spent his life building something that would reduce suffering for others. His repentance was not expressed in words, but in decades of labor that benefited countless people he would never meet. This is what makes it authentic. It was not about restoring his image or earning forgiveness. It was about serving life itself. To live for others in this way is not a form of self-sacrifice rooted in guilt. It is an expression of compassion. When we truly see the impact of our actions, when we understand how suffering spreads, we naturally feel a desire to alleviate it. That desire, when acted upon, becomes compassion in motion. In modern life, we often look for quick ways to resolve guilt. We apologize, we try to make things right, and then we hope to move on. These steps are important, but they are not the full picture. Real transformation asks more of us. It asks us to let our mistakes change how we live, not just how we feel. What if, instead of being defined by what we regret, we allowed those experiences to deepen our sensitivity to others? What if our past mistakes became the very reason we chose to act with greater care, greater kindness, and greater awareness? This is the shift from guilt to contribution. Compassion, in this sense, is not just an emotion, it is a direction. It is expressed through consistent action, through the willingness to give, to support, and to reduce harm wherever we can. It is not about perfection, but about intention, made real through behavior. Zengai's life reminds us that we are not limited to who we have been. Even the most painful actions can become the starting point for something meaningful, but only if we move beyond guilt and into responsibility, not as a burden, but as a path. True repentance is not something we say, it is something we live. When we step back and look at all these stories, the impatient student, the haunting ghost, the missing pilgrim, and the man who carved a mountain, we begin to see that they are not separate teachings, but reflections of a single truth viewed from different angles. Each story points us inward. Each one reveals in its own way that what we are searching for has never been outside of us. Matajuro's struggle shows us that rushing toward mastery keeps us from the very presence where mastery is born. The ghost reminds us that much of what we fear is created within our own minds. The pilgrims reveal how easily we overlook the one thing that is never missing ourselves. And Zengai's life demonstrates that even our deepest mistakes can become the ground for awakening when we respond with conscious action. Taken together, these teachings dissolve a powerful illusion, the belief that enlightenment is something to achieve. We are conditioned to think of awakening as a distant goal, something reserved for the disciplined, the wise, or the spiritually advanced. We imagine it as a final destination, a state we will one day reach if we try hard enough. But Zen offers a radically different perspective. Enlightenment is not something we gain. It is something we recognize. It is not found at the end of effort, but in the clarity that arises when effort stops being driven by grasping. It is not a new experience added to our lives, but a shift in how we see what has always been here. Like the 10th pilgrim, it was never lost. Like the ghost, it was only obscured by what we believed. Like Matajuro's mastery, it unfolds naturally when we stop forcing and begin allowing. This does not mean that practice is unnecessary. The pilgrims still walked their path. Zengai still spent decades carving the tunnel. Matajuro still trained under his master. But the meaning of their actions changed. What began as striving became expression. What began as searching became seeing. Awakening is not about becoming someone else. It is about returning to yourself. Not the self made of memories, roles, and identities, but the deeper presence that has always been here, quiet, aware, and untouched by the fluctuations of life. It is the awareness that noticed your thoughts. As you read these words, the same awareness that has been present in every moment of your experience. We overlook it because it is so simple. We search for something extraordinary, something dramatic, something that will confirm we have finally arrived. But awakening often appears in the most ordinary way, through a moment of clear, seeing a pause in the noise, a recognition that nothing essential is missing. And in that recognition, something softens. The urgency to become fades. The fear of not being enough loosens. The need to chase dissolves into a quiet sense of completeness. Not because life has become perfect, but because we are no longer looking at it through the lens of lack. This is the silent return. Not a dramatic transformation, but a gentle remembering. Like the pilgrims realizing the 10th was always there. Like the man seeing that the ghost was never real. Like Zengai, who stopped being defined by his past and simply lived his understanding. Nothing new is added. Nothing essential is gained. But everything is seen differently. And in that shift we discover what has been waiting all along, that we were never separate from what we were seeking.